Hi, today we're going to take a look at one of three new lenses announced recently by Sigma. This is a Sigma 17mm f4 DC DN lens. So let's see what it can do. In early April 2023, Sigma introduced three compact lenses: the 50mm f2 DC DN lens that we shall review in a separate video, the 17mm f4 DC DN that we shall review in this video, and the Sigma 23mm f1.4 DC DN APS-C lens. As we always do, we shall start with the optical design. The lens has an optical design which includes 9 elements in 8 groups with 2 SLD and 3 aspherical elements. The Sigma 17mm, just like all other Sigma I-series lenses, is made from metal and feels really nice to hold and handle. Despite its metal build, the lens is very light at around 225 grams and about 5 centimeters long, making it one of the most compact full-frame lenses that we have ever tested. The lens has two fairly narrow rings, a slightly wider focus ring on the front and a narrower aperture ring closer to the camera. The focus ring has a very good feel to it with just the right amount of resistance. The aperture ring moves in clicks and can get out of auto mode a little too easily for our taste. The lens has a single AF/MF switch. We would really like to start seeing Sigma adding an aperture lock to its I-series of lenses, and we would not say no to a D-click switch as well. The 17mm has a rubber gasket on its rear and it is marketed as a weather-sealed lens. At the moment, the lens comes in a full-frame E-mount and an L-mount variants. The lens comes with a small metal hood with grooves both inside and outside. The hood adds about 2.5 centimeters to the length of the lens. The lens has a 7-blade rounded diaphragm, and it supports 55mm filters. Now let's move over to performance, and we will start with focusing. We tested the autofocus performance of the lens in the studio, both in good lighting conditions and in ultra-low light with our Sony A1. In good lighting conditions, the lens's high-speed stepping motor worked great both in stills and in video. In ultra-low lighting conditions, the autofocus was a little slower but still accurate both in stills and in video. We also tested the focus throw of the lens, and sadly, like all other Sigma lenses that we have tested to date, it is a non-linear focus lens, which means that you won't be able to achieve precise repeated focus pulls when shooting video. This lens has no optical image stabilization, so you're left with sensor stabilization only. We tested the sharpness of the 17mm using our special large professional Imates high-end chart on our Sony A1. The lens is plenty sharp at f4 in the center of the frame with not much visible improvement closing down. In the corners, the lens is also fairly sharp, although you might get a bit more contrast at f5.6. The closest lens that we own is the Sony 20mm f1.8, and surprisingly, when both lenses are at f4, the Sigma is much sharper both in the center, but especially in the corners. If there is one thing that we like about the new 17mm Sigma lens is how close you can get with it to your subject. You can literally get almost as close as the edge of the hood to what you're shooting. This is pretty amazing. The official close-up focusing distance of this lens is only 12 centimeters from the sensor plane, and it has a maximum magnification ratio of 1 to 3.6. This unbelievably close focusing distance does come with a cost. While the lens has an okay sharpness close-up in the center wide open, and a very good sharpness starting at about f5.6, it has an abysmal corner sharpness thanks to an intense field curvature even at f11, so please keep this in mind when you're shooting with this lens. Just for comparison, our Sony 20mm lens has far less macro magnification, but its sharpness in the center at f4 is better, and it is worlds apart in the corners with basically no visible field curvature. The Sigma has very slight focus breathing, as you can see from our test. For comparison, the Sony 20mm has a lot more, but with supported cameras you can cancel it completely using breathing compensation. Unsurprisingly, for a modern slow prime lens, we didn't counter any sort of longitudinal chromatic aberrations, even wide open, with a Sigma 17mm. Looking at the flare of the Sigma, we could see a little orange and green in the frame against strong bright light, but overall it seems to be well controlled. Just for reference, our Sony 20mm performed much worse in this test. With the in-camera shading compensation turned off on our camera, the Sigma certainly has visible darkening in the corners, which does not seem to go completely away even at f11. As you might have noticed from our previous tests, the Sigma has a huge amount of barrel distortion when the distortion compensation is turned off in the camera. When it comes to the bokeh, the Sigma should not be your first choice with very small light circles and very low background separation unless you are very close to your subject. Our Sony 20mm with its fast f1.8 aperture is a much better choice for this task. Since we got the Sigma 17mm just a few days before it was announced, we didn't have a lot of time to shoot with it, but here are a few sample images. So let's conclude. The Sigma 17mm is one of the coolest tiny little lenses that we have tested here on LensVid in a long time. It's well built and easy to use, it has very good fast autofocus, great image quality across the frame from normal distances, almost no breathing or chromatic aberrations, and very good flare control. Our favorite feature about this lens is the unique look that you get when shooting objects close up, and while it has horrible field curvature, as long as you keep your subject centered, you can get some really interesting shots. Not everything is perfect about the Sigma 17mm of course. Besides its low aperture and the aforementioned field curvature, it also has a lot of barrel distortion and quite a bit of vignette, and its bokeh is nothing to write home about. With that said, its sharpness, size and unique close-up capabilities as well as its affordable price tag makes this lens a very interesting option. Talking about pricing, the Sigma 17mm DC DN lens should start selling for around $600. So that was our look at the Sigma 17mm f4 DC DN lens. You can check out the full review with all of our test results on lensvid.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There is another Sigma lens review coming very soon. See you next time.